Welcome back, guys. Now, the case of 8 passengers YouTuber mom, who is popular for all the wrong reasons now, by name Ruby Frankie, and her business partner, Jody Hildebrandt, is still ongoing. I've been following this case, and as it stands now, each of them have been charged with 6 counts of felony child abuse. If you are not privy to all this, you can just go back to my playlist and watch the videos. But as at recently, when the case broke and as it was evolving, especially after the arrest, people were asking, where is the father of the children? By name Kevin Frankie. Where is he? How come he was not arrested by the police? And where was he in all this? To the point that two of his kids have been bound by duct tape at the residence of Jody Hildebrandt, whilst their mom also goes to shoot videos there with Jody Hildebrandt, and these kids are so famished and seem malnourished and all. Where is their dad? It would come out that their dad has actually separated from their mom for about 13 months, and reports are allegedly indicating that this was upon the request of Ruby Frankie. So the parents have been separated, but even with that, in my previous videos, I was still asking the question, even if you are separated, how can a father go 13 months straight without seeing his children? And if he saw his children, how come he didn't pick up on these things? Or is it that he's actually part of it from a distance? Or he's just ignorant of everything that has happened? These are questions that were lingering in my mind. And at the just ended custody hearing, where Ruby Frankie ended up throwing her kids under the bus, actually accusing one of them of sexually assaulting the others and other kids in their neighborhood. Kevin Frankie, their father, was there, and he didn't also say anything to defend his kids. He had this straight face on, he was silent, and people were trying to put a read on him. I was watching it, but I couldn't really put a read on this guy. So I also had the same question as most of my subscribers and people out there. Where does Kevin Frankie stand in all this? Is he complicit, or is he too scared to speak? Well, guess what? Kevin Frankie has finally broken his silence, and he did so indirectly through his lawyer by name Randy Kester. Now, Randy Kester was granted an interview by a media house, and some pertinent questions came up with regards to his client, Kevin Frankie, and how Kevin Frankie plays out in all this with regards to what his kids have been going through for at least 13 months since he last was together with his wife as a couple, and the fact that he could be a suspect although he's yet to be arrested, or is it that he never knew anything about this? Now, according to Kevin Frankie's lawyer, Randy Kester, Kevin Frankie is allegedly struggling with what has happened so far with regards to what has been broadcasted in the news, literally, that his kids are going through at the hands of Jody Hildebrandt and their own mom, his wife or ex-wife, Ruby Frankie. So it begins to paint a picture that maybe Kevin Frankie was not aware. And his lawyer said he had no idea of anything up until the day Ruby Frankie called Kevin Frankie at the time when she was about to be arrested by the police, and at which point Ruby Frankie asked Kevin Frankie to now come down to the home because something serious was coming up. Yeah. When I picked up on this information, it didn't make sense to me too, because how does it play out? You've been separated from your wife for 13 months. How were you seeing the kids? Were you even talking to them on phone? You can't go 13 months without seeing your kids, especially since you are in the same country with them. If you've traveled outside, that is a bit different, but you are in the same USA with them. So how can you go all this while without seeing them? But these are the questions that are still lingering. And what Kevin Frankie's lawyer is saying, he had no idea his kids were going through this. He only found out when the news broke, and Ruby Franke called him to come home. So it seems that he had no idea about what his case was going through with the torture they were being subjected to and the horrible ordeal that they were suffering. Now, his lawyer also claims that Kevin Franke never saw the kids after he and Ruby Franke separated. And I'm surprised at this. He went on to say that this was upon the advice of Ruby Franke. And Ruby Franke allegedly had indicated that that was what was best for their marriage, and it was one of the things that could make their marriage and home get better so they come back together. Really, some way, somehow, you've decided to separate from your husband, and you think the best way to make things better going forward is for him to stay away from his children for over 13 months, whilst you are behind the scenes, either subjecting them or allowing them to be subjected to these horrendous treatments. It doesn't add up for me. Of course, these are all allegations because in the eyes of the law, like I always say, they are presumed innocent until found guilty. So all these are allegations until proven in court. But here are my questions. 1. How is Kevin Franke ignorant of all this? If his lawyer is saying that he didn't see these kids in all these 13 months he was away and he had no idea they were going through this, okay, let's assume that is accurate. But then it triggers this question. The fact that he didn't see them does not mean he didn't necessarily talk to them. If he did, I'm sure maybe at least there was a phone call, be it audio, or even better, a video call. Was he calling his kids at all as their father? If he was it an audio call or a video call? Irrespective of whichever medium it was, if he called, did he get to find out anything from these kids? Because obviously, if a parent is talking to a kid, one of the key questions that will come up in the early aspects of the conversation is, how are you doing? Are you fine? And that question in itself should trigger any problems the kid is suffering to come out in the conversation, most likely. So, was he talking to the kids at all? And did he ever get to pick up on anything, or did he ever get to find out or hear anything from these kids? That should have prompted him that something was off. Or it's also possible he just didn't care and took advantage of Ruby Franke's alleged suggestion and also just rode into the sunshine and was living his best life. Is that also something that could be possible? I'm asking. Because for me, honestly, I don't understand this, irrespective of the fact that it seems that he wanted the marriage to work, so he was ready to follow Ruby Franke's advice. I think that it's a bit naive and a bit ignorant on his part, if it was true, to think that the best way to get your marriage together is to ignore your kids for 13 months. I think either way you are losing. And I don't think that that is a smart decision or a smart advice you should also be following. It makes you not so smart. And I think that is one of the key evidences of the manipulation between Ruby Franke towards her husband, Kevin Franke, possibly. Unless Kevin Franke has also misinformed his lawyer. But if that is accurate, that was what Ruby Franke said, then I think Ruby Franke was probably manipulating Kevin Franke. Because, mind you, they had separated. And it's been rumored that they had disagreements on the parenting techniques. So probably, Ruby Franke's main motive for suggesting Kevin Franke keeps his distance was so she could have full access without any interference from Kevin to take these kids through that rigorous kind of training that they were found in. That is a possible theory. I'm not saying it's a fact, but it's a possible theory. Another question I have is, did Kevin Franke just follow Ruby's advice to stay away from family, or could he have done more? I said it earlier. It's not a smart advice, especially if you are a parent. You can't say the best way to save your marriage is to ignore your kids for 13 months. Either way, you are losing. So, is it that Kevin Franke was that dumb? Or he was such a simp? Or he was so much in love, he lost his thinking cap and his objectivity? Or he was that selfish and felt that I don't mind sacrificing 13 months away from my kids if I could get back with my wife? I don't think either of these puts him in a good light. And also, it also, for me, puts that assertion under a question mark because there's a possibility he's even lying. But again, it will be proven in court because I don't see how a full-grown man like that can just be giving such an advice and follow it as if he didn't know the ripple implications it would have on his kids and himself, especially as far as their relationship as a father and children are concerned. I think he knew better and he could have done more. Now, the third question is, Kevin Franke and Ruby Franke separated on the basis of parenting idea differences, among other things. That is the rumor out there. Now, if this was the case, why did he not see the need to check up on the kids after he had left? Because already they were having disagreements with how these kids should be handled, especially with punishment and discipline, if the rumors are true. Now, if these rumors are true and you are separated with your wife and these kids are with your wife, don't you think it makes more sense to rather keep a close eye on how things are going, knowing that you are no longer there on a daily basis to sort of protect these kids from your wife's extreme tendencies? So if you knew all these differences between you guys as far as parenting is concerned, and some way, somehow, you felt it was okay to follow the advice your wife gave that if you want me back, if you want our home and marriage to work and come together, stay away from me and the kids for 13 months, and you followed it. This is another reason why that assertion for me doesn't add up. I'm thinking maybe he might have misled his lawyer, or maybe it's true and he was just a simp or deeply in love with his wife. He just followed it. I don't know, but for me, that doesn't sit right with me. And this is where we even get to the crux of this issue. Up to this point, we are talking about Ruby Franke and then Kevin Franke. But let's not forget, there is the third person by name Jodi Hildebrandt. Now, Jody Hildebrandt is in a unique position. We know Ruby Franke and Kevin Franke from the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, which of course has now been terminated. But Jodi Hildebrandt comes in as the third party. And well, she's not a dark horse because we know what she stands for. She also has her channel and she partnered up with with Ruby Franke. So now, let's look at this perspective. How does Jodi Hildebrandt fit in all this? First of all, looking at the breakup between Ruby Franke and her husband, Kevin Franke. Mind you, they have 6 kids. It takes a lot of commitment and unity to be together and have 6 kids. So what caused them to fall apart? Where Kevin had to now leave and Ruby was left with the kids, and Jodi Hildebrandt some way somehow have the kids or 2 of them in her custody in that horrific bondage situation. Is it possible that Jodi Hildebrandt is a mastermind who herself was the puppeteer, pulling the strings of Ruby Franke, and felt the need that Kevin Franke should get gotten out of the picture so they can have the free access to manipulate things? That is a possibility. Because if you look at the whole thing, it's beginning to look like Ruby Franke might be partially a victim of Jodi Hildebrandt and also a perpetrator herself against her kids. That is a possibility, and it looks like she's looking up to Jody Hildebrandt, or both of them are birds of the same feathers who are just flying together and the kids are the ones suffering as a result. But I think that one possible outcome that could become clear during trial could be that Jody Hildebrandt was actually manipulating Ruby Franke against her husband and eventually got her to kick him out. And I think that makes more sense to me as a possibility, because that will then explain how she would end up being able to have access to the kids and keep two of them in her custody in her home. Because I don't think she would be able to get the access if the father was around. Definitely, it would be a battle and she will be exposed. But knowing that she's on the same page with Ruby Franke, it makes sense that she would see it as an easy achievement or an easy possibility to get the kids through her custody and then subject them to that sort of horrendous treatment, which of course she believes in as the way to go as far as disciplining kids is concerned. So I won't be surprised if it turns out that Jodi Hildebrandt actually manipulated Ruby Franke. And if that's the case, can we say Jodi Hildebrandt is a homebreaker? Because if she manipulated Ruby Franke, then it's safe to assume or suspect that probably she broke up their home as well, just so she could have her way. Or is it rather that Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt are accomplices, or that Ruby Franke is rather a victim of Jodi Hildebrandt? Either way, Jodi Hildebrandt doesn't come out of this looking good in any way. I think she's a straightforward villain in all this, and it's going to be an uphill battle for her to be able to prove that some way, somehow, she is a victim or she is not at fault. I think that in as much as both of them have been charged each with 6 counts of felony child abuse, the cards are stacked higher against Jodi Hildebrandt's defense team, because it's going to be an uphill battle, especially for her. Not that Ruby Franke will be off the hook, but I think she may have the possibility of her defense putting up certain arguments that might lessen whatever punitive measures will be leveled against her. But with regards to Jodi Hildebrandt, I don't see any windows for her to try and escape through. And come to think of it, I think that these two women also bonded, but I think Ruby Franke was also sort of impressed or trying to please Jodi Hildebrandt. If you look at them, you see Jodi is probably older in age and has been at this longer. She also has educational qualifications in counseling and other stuff. So if it comes to reaching people's psyche, getting people to comply to certain things, sort of influencing the thought process of people, between the two of them, I can say that Jodi Hildebrandt will be better at it more than Ruby Franke. So there's a tendency in there that even between the two of them, there would be a leader and a follower, and I would pick Jodi Hildebrandt as that leader. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But that is what my analysis is telling me. And according to Randy Kester, the lawyer of Kevin Franke, Ruby Franke's husband, now estranged, he indicated that Kevin Franke actually suspects that Ruby was manipulating him on the basis of his need to see his family come together. And I said this because according to him, he realized that both him and Ruby, they seem to be falling apart. He wanted the marriage to come together, but Ruby wasn't so concerned about that. And it looks like at a point in time, Ruby saw she could use that as leverage against Kevin to get him to do what she wants him to do. And if Ruby is the puppet of the puppeteer, Jodi Hildebrandt, then definitely Jody Hildebrandt will now have access to that leverage to pull Ruby's strings, for Ruby to now use that leverage as a means or a tool to manipulate Kevin to leave home, and by so doing, leave the kids exposed to the whims and caprices and extreme tactics of Jodi Hildebrandt, in which case they were now found in her custody at her house, malnourished, bound by duct tape, and amongst other severe conditions. This is my theory, and Kevin Franke has spoken out. He actually also believes that in the end, in the medium to long term, it seems that it's possible that Jodi Hildebrandt had actually manipulated both himself and his wife Ruby Franke, probably through his wife Ruby Franke. That is a possibility, and I can't wait for this trial to start. I don't know the defenses that Ruby Franke's defense team are going to put up for her, and even worse, Jodi Hildebrandt's team are also going to put up for her. But one thing I know is it's going to be an uphill battle. Now, in all this, I'm actually hoping that the kids will come out of this unscathed, because they are at the mercy of all these tendencies. They've been at the mercy of these harsh treatments by these two men, and even being able to come out of the trauma in itself is not going to be easy. Not to talk about the fact that there will be a possibility they could also be repeating the cycle later in the future. So it's an uphill battle for them too, and I'm trusting that they will be given the necessary emotional, medical, psychological care to get them out of any trauma that they've suffered as a result of this. I'm still following this case, and I'll bring you updates as and when they are due. Subscribe, turn on post notifications, and leave a comment. Catch you next time, and stay safe out there.